Welcome to the Daily Elevated Show. We have a very special guest today, Bryanna Robinson. We are going to get into some very dicey and topical conversations. So make sure you stick around and we'll be right back. So I want to introduce Bryanna, but before I do, I want to kind of give you a background on her. She makes amazing content on Instagram about tons of different subjects, everything from the moon landing to culture to politics. So definitely recommend that you check her out. But welcome, Bryanna. It's great to have you on.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So can you tell me, a bit about what really drives you? What piques your interest when you make this content? Like, what makes you? What brings that out of you? So where you're like, I have to investigate and tell people about this because for me, it's one thing, but I would love to know, like, from your end, where it comes from.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm not even that interested in politics. I find politics quite boring, to be honest. But I have this insatiable curiosity. Um, so a lot of my content is very conspiracy based, I guess you would say, because I just want to know things. I just want to know everything, and that includes politics, it includes culture, and obviously the more taboo subjects like the moon landing and the Titanic, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, international banking, all of that. So honestly, I'm just driven by a desire to know. I just want to know everything, and I think I have an ability to organize the information and get it out to people in a way that they can easily understand and access it.
Yeah. So what's interesting is all those subjects always tie into politics. Like
Hmm.
there's really nothing that doesn't have politics touching it, or is the catalyst that gets that started.
Yeah.
I just found out about this whole story about the Titanic, about how was it like a bunch of banking heads were on the Titanic,
Hmm.
and there was a big. Uh, can you explain that a little bit because I kind of forget exactly what happened.
Yeah, so that's an interesting story. So on Jekyll Island, you have the representatives of the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, a few very important, very influential bloodlines who happen to run the banking system, including JP Morgan. So their representatives meet, they have this meeting on Jekyll Island. There were two very outspoken opponents to the banking system. They wanted to create the Fed, and this was back in the early 1900s. Um, and it just so happened that those opponents were on the Titanic when it sank. Now, certain individuals who were supposed to be on the Titanic, including I believe it was the Rothschilds themselves, they pulled out at the last minute.
Naturally.
Yeah, the Vanderbergs, yeah, they pulled out at the last minute. And then an incident had happened at sea where the sister ship to the Titanic, the Olympic, or no, was it the Britannic? It was one of those,
Mhm.
crashed into a Navy ship, and they were not allowed to collect the insurance money from that. So, of course, Rothschild, who owns the White Star Line, was very upset about that. And sinking the Titanic allowed him to not only collect the insurance money, but also to get rid of the opponents to the Fed. And then the Fed was created literally the next year.
Which is really interesting because if you think about who collects the insurance money when things like this happen, then you look at things like 9/11, where he just
Mm-hmm.
kind of magically got that insurance policy
Oh,
right
yeah.
before everything happened, got paid out on it. I mean, it's just incredible. I feel like they reuse the storylines. The more and more you study history, the more you say this already happened. This
Mm-hmm.
already happened. One of the most interesting things I just realized when talking about reusing storylines is the Bolsonaro story in Brazil. So if people don't know this, they literally are copying that storyline for the Trump narrative. He contested an election that he lost because of the voting machine irregularities. The Supreme Court of Brazil deemed him that he said that he incited a riot at the Capitol. Um, Said that he was not justified in contending the election, so they've banned him until 2030
Mm-hmm.
for running. And when I read that, I felt like I was reading the well, it is the same storyline,
Yeah.
but it's incredible how um, history repeats itself. It's one of the oldest sayings, but it's really true. And I feel like the Great Awakening, which is people waking up to all these different facts of stories that we haven't been fed, is finally coming to a culmination point where people are opening their eyes, and it's beautiful to see.
Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder with the whole history repeating thing. Do these oligarchs and these tyrants and these globalists, do they think we're actually that stupid that we won't see it, or are they just not smart enough to come up with a new game to play?
Yeah, I think the decentralization of information has really thrown a wrench in their whole thing because they can't control it anymore, and that's why they
Mm-hmm.
hate Elon. I know that's why they hate Elon Musk because ever since he bought Twitter, I mean, look at what's happened. You've had this massive counter uh, to the revolution that's happening. What people are just waking up and they're not being they're being spoon fed this stuff, but they're not eating it. They're
Mm-hmm.
back out and say, "No, I wanna know what's in this food, like, I wanna know what's really going on." So it really makes you question all of history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. History is written by the victors. I mean, do we really know the true story?
You know, more and more so I'm a big fan of history and especially Julius Caesar,
Mm-hmm.
and the guy was an absolute maniac, and I'm surprised they haven't tried to cancel him yet, because if you wanna talk about someone who does genocide, the guy
Yeah.
literally will conquer nations or tribes, peoples, and kill them all,
Yeah.
burn their entire town, and then write them out of history so you never knew they even existed, which is
Yeah.
incredible. He would tell people that, like, "If you come against me, I'm gonna send my guys there." I mean, it happened so many times. So that's and then he wrote his own history in third person.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
Wild.
it's just I love what's happening, and I love that more people are starting to wake up. And because of videos like yours on the internet, people can take different subjects and consume them, and at least think critically. Even if they don't
Mm-hmm.
agree with you, they can at least think critically about it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So there are a few stories that I wanted to talk about today because they just happened, and I would love to get your take on it. So one of them is actually it's not political. But it does tie into politics because it's been used for a very nefarious reason. But I wanted to pull it up, and it talks about how loneliness uh, has essentially makes you die sooner, which is pretty incredible. So let me go ahead and pull this up here. So the headline says, "Never seen family or friends can lead to an early death." Researchers in Scotland have found a striking link between the lack of in person visits from loved ones and an increased risk of death. The study, which scrutinizes the influence of social interactions on mortality, offers new insights into how social factors can impact our health, especially during the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, um, which is what we kind of all knew. But now the scientists are finally coming around. But I think what they've done is absolutely horrible. Dividing us and keeping us isolated during COVID. So I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I actually made a video about that maybe a year and a half ago on the loneliness epidemic, and specifically talking about how not just that it leads to an early death, but also being in nature. I grew up mostly in the city. I'm from Riverside, Orange County area, and now living out in the country, it's a whole different world. Like the real world is out in nature, and we built our worlds in these concrete jungles, and it disrupts your nervous system. It creates feelings of loneliness. Just getting out into nature, I believe it was once a week, the study showed, decreases feelings of loneliness by 28%.
Wow.
But yeah, loneliness is a huge contributing factor to an early death. And I think also not just like being around people, but real community, people who hear you, who understand you, who get you, who genuinely care about you. And there's such a lack of that in our culture, especially in the younger generations. It's very touch and go. It's very, what can I get from you? It's very hook up and then leave the person. The culture it does not support a healthy immune system, the healthy nervous system, or healthy communities.
Yeah, I think you're spot on about everything you said. So I actually grew up in Orange County, believe it or not. Born in Los Angeles, grew up in Orange County. Been back in Hollywood for like 13 years now. But living in a concrete jungle and having the ability to have experience living and traveling in places where you have space, where you have land, it's an entirely different feeling on the human psyche. During COVID, I rode my bicycle across the country from LA to New York, and that's when I mean, I backpacked for 5 years, just everywhere. But that trip really showed me, like, wow, America is so big and so beautiful. Like there's just so much space. And sometimes I'd be riding my bike, especially in the early mornings where you have the sunrise coming up. I'm like, wow, I am literally out here in this beautiful land, and people are stuck in their cubicle at work with that, and they'll never
Yeah.
experience this, and it's so sad that they won't. And I know more and more people are pushed to the city because of opportunity and social life and things like that.
Mhm.
Um, but I think that's one of the ploys, because you can control people in the city a lot easier than you can out in the country where they're self-sustaining themselves, which is incredible
Yes.
to think about.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and on that note, like we process our own meat out here now, and I mean, we get like upwards of 20 to 30 eggs a day. Like we're becoming more and more self-sufficient. Yeah, it's a totally different ball game, and you realize just how much the government sucks when you move out to the country and become self-sufficient. Um, you realize, like, we don't even, if you live in the city, you don't realize how much you're indoctrinated and how much, you've consented to the control. It's just a part of your way of life until you leave that and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I lived like that. That was actually pretty oppressive.
Yeah, yeah, and everything's done for you. Everything's
Mm-hmm.
created for you. I actually wrote. I don't know if I published this, but I wrote it yesterday or a few days ago, where I was thinking about when you live in cities, you are dependent on the government for so much
Yes.
more. So for essentially everything, and you're not dependent on your neighbor for any of it. You
Mm-hmm.
don't even know your neighbors in some of these. Like I don't know my neighbors.
Yeah.
Maybe like a few, but because I don't have to depend on them. So there's no community. When you live in the countryside or when you live in a small community, you literally depend on people for something.
Yeah.
And they depend on you, whether it be for safety, for self-policing, for just uh, morals and get-togethers and things like that. So I think that's a huge, huge component that we're missing living in cities is you don't have to depend on anyone. And
Yeah.
if you don't know anybody, you don't care about them. So it's like a bunch of distrust everywhere
And narcissism.
and narcissism.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think you're spot on, and I think you made a good choice. I mean, Joe Rogan moved out of California. Uh, Even Jeff Bezos moved out of Seattle, went to Miami. Elon Musk moved out of here. Um, and speaking of which, now as of today, it just came out that California is in for a rude awakening, because we are now in a $68 billion deficit. Like, this is insane. We are in a California as of today. Let me go ahead and share this. Oh, that's the wrong story. We are in a $68 billion deficit. So it says the deficit swelled to $68 billion after months of unexpected low tax revenue, a shortfall that can prompt the state's deepest spending cuts since the Great Recession.
Oh
This
my gosh.
I wish the story would have come out before Gavin had his debate with Ron DeSantis, because
Yes.
I don't know if they stopped the story from getting out before that, but I mean, I assume they probably did.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
that's
Yeah.
horrible. That's horrible.
California is one big socialist experiment that is just utterly failing. The water, the power grid, the homeless. I mean, it's a single party rule state, and if it's not clear enough already that it's ineffective leadership, Democrat leadership is ineffective. I don't know what else is going to make people see, because California's a disaster.
It's part of me wants to leave here, but then the other part says if I leave, it just gives them more power. Like,
Yeah.
if I'm here fighting against it, then at least there's someone here. So do I cut and
Yeah.
run and go for greener pastures, or do I stay and try to help? Right.
Yeah. That was
And
my dilemma as well. I had to be dragged out. I did not want to leave. I wanted to stay and fight.
mm, but the beautiful thing about what you do is you can affect people from literally anywhere you're at.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so here in California, if people watching aren't from here, or specifically Los Angeles, especially because it's clearly the largest city, but there's I haven't seen Hollywood this bad since I lived here. And I grew up as a child in East LA in the 90s when it was really, really bad. I remember the
Mm-hmm.
Compton riots. I lived right in that area, and I haven't seen it this bad since then. They closed down all the mental health facilities. So now everyone's on the streets. They allow people to just have tent cities and literally houses on the sidewalks.
Yeah.
They'll clean them up, but then they'll come right back. There's nobody prosecutes crime. I've had so many friends. I've had friends who have been killed because of crime, and I've had tons of friends be robbed for their watches, for their cars, uh, everything. Like tons of my friends. Nothing happens. No one gets prosecuted.
Mm.
Gascon, which is the district attorney of Los
Yeah.
Angeles, he's a source appointed DA. He used to be the DA of San Francisco under
Hmm.
Newsom, and property crime surged something like 50%. They don't prosecute property crime. It's
Hmm.
just every single thing that can go wrong has been going wrong. It's because these socialist policies, they
Yeah.
don't work.
Yeah. And now they want to empty out the prisons. They've been working on that for a while now. I think it was 75,000 um, people that they were letting out. And I think it was 23,000 of those were convicted of violent crimes. There were some murderers that were being let out just for the sake of emptying the prisons. I used to dance, I was going to dance professionally. And so as I was going to LA to do my auditions and whatnot, one of the reasons I quit is because it was dangerous as a 5'2" little blonde female to walk these streets by myself to get to these auditions. I just wasn't willing to put myself at risk like that.
Yeah. And you know what's sad is I see a lot of tourists that come here, and I can see in their eyes when they're walking on Hollywood Boulevard, the image that they had, and they spent all this time and money and
Yeah.
saved up for months and months to come here, and the look on their eyes when they're dressed really nicely, they're walking down Hollywood Boulevard on the Avenue of the Stars, they call it, and they look around and they're like, "What the hell is this?" It's like
Yeah.
their dreams have just been shattered. And in my head, I'm like, just go to West Hollywood, go to Beverly Hills, like
Yeah.
get out of the main
Yeah.
part. But there's this image and facade of what Hollywood is. You come here and it's really, really dangerous. I have a lot of
Hmm.
friends who come from Dubai, England, and all these other places, and they're like pretty girls. And the first thing I do, I said, When you get here, I'm going to give you pepper spray. I'm going to show you how to use it, and always have it in your hand whenever
Yeah.
you walk on the street." Because you're right. Being like a female and being blonde and walking around, you have a target on your back.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I used to go to concerts at the Hollywood Bowl a lot, and I always had people with me. I was never alone. But we would go down to Hollywood Boulevard afterwards and just like hang out. There were always street performers at like midnight, 1 in the morning, and it was really fun. And you cannot do that anymore.
No, no, you can't. Yeah, it's crazy. There's stories all the time that happen here. And if anyone's listening and says that sounds horrible, well, it'll be coming to a city near you unless
Hmm.
something changes, because these policies are being spread everywhere. These source appointed DAs and local politicians are in your city, state already. I'm seeing ads actually. I don't know if you've seen this, but I'm seeing ads on Instagram saying, clearly it's this like leftist organization saying you should run for office. We're going to show you exactly how to do it. So they're taking people and they're pushing them for these positions because they want to fill every single administrative, public official, school board, you name it. They want to get someone in there to completely take over everything.
Yeah, it's
And
unbelievable.
a lot of these leftist people they don't have any kids, so they have a bunch of free time
Yeah.
to go do a bunch of stuff. And so I think that's a really interesting position that we find ourselves in.
Yeah. Even here in Texas, I mean, there's so much going on here in Texas that people just don't realize. I think Texans are, they're under the illusion that they live in Texas, the freest state in the nation, and that could not be further from the truth. We actually were ranked 25th in terms of conservative policy in the
Wow.
US. A lot of Soros backed, Clinton backed DA candidates. The school system is appalling. I think it's worse than California as far as like the woke LGBT
Oh,
nonsense. Tons of children's drag shows. I mean, I went to some like all up and down the state, just so many. Um, yeah, I don't think people realize how bad it is. And it's not just California, it's everywhere now.
hmm. Yeah, I was in Dallas about a month ago or so visiting a friend, a buddy of mine, and he was telling me, he goes, all the cowboys left. He goes, there's no cowboys in Dallas anymore.
Yeah.
They all moved to whatever city is near there. I forget what. But he's like, yeah, they all went over there. And he was showing me, and he's like, yeah, there's a really, really big gay community in Dallas, I guess.
Hmm.
And it's definitely not what I thought it would be. It was my first time going to Dallas actually, and it was very modern. It felt like I was
Yes.
living in like a, I don't know, it just felt very like hipsterish.
Yeah. Yeah. It's becoming more like Austin.
Interesting.
Yeah, all the
So
major cities have gay clubs and organizations and parades, pride parades. Even smaller cities like Waco, San Antonio, it's affecting everywhere.
That's interesting. So we're gonna go to a quick commercial break, and then I want to talk about something that happened. This is politics, even though you don't like politics. But Hunter Biden is being indicted again for the umpteenth time. So we'll be right back after this. All right. So I did want to bring this up because I think it's incredibly important. And well, let me just show it first, and then I'll explain what I think is happening, and then let me know your thoughts on it. So Hunter Biden today was indicted again on federal tax charges and gun charges. Sorry, tax evasion charges and gun charges. So we know he's a crackhead. We know he's a pedophile. We know he's a bad guy. Like this is literally the worst guy you can have as a son. And I don't know why he turned out that way, but whatever it is, he did. I mean, it made me look at his dad, and you can, the apple doesn't far fall from the tree. But if you haven't seen his pictures on his laptop, which the FBI said never existed, and then had to, say, oh, well, it does exist. You can get those pictures online, and it's pretty crazy. I've gone through a lot of them. The guy is basically cross-dressing, has hookers, and just every one of his pictures has these young girls in it smoking crack on camera in pictures, taking naked pictures of himself. Like this is like the guy that you would never want around anybody who basically. And now he's getting indicted again with the gun charges and things like that. So basically, he says that there was an investigation into the business dealings of Joe Biden's son, and that it's intensifying. Now he has 3 felonies and 6 misdemeanors, in addition to federal firearms charges in Delaware, alleging that he broke laws against drug users having guns in 2018. So essentially, he's getting bamboozled, not bamboozled, actually. He actually did this stuff. So let me tell you what I think about it, and then you let me know what you think about it. So, and I called this out 6 months ago or so, and it's not like I figured this out. It's pretty obvious that they want to get rid of Joe Biden because he's sucking in the polls so bad, and put Gavin Newsom in. So how do you do that? Well, you make it to the point where he has so much happening to him, so many indictments from his son, the bribes stuff is coming out like crazy now, that you get him to essentially drop out, and you're able to run Gavin Newsom, who's a younger candidate, who we know is running a shadow campaign, as DeSantis put it. He's debating the guy running for the nomination of the Republican Party. Why? If he's doing all this, Biden literally told him that you would basically saying that you could have my job if I wasn't running for it, that you would do a good job at it. He's inviting dictators, communist dictators, into California. He's cleaning up the street for him. It's like, you have to be dumb to not see what's happening. So I think this is a move being allowed by the Democratic Party, who runs the justice system at this point, to get him out of there.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have any other thoughts on it, or just, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, he's barely alive at this point. And like, I mean that genuinely. Like, I'm not trying to be funny. He's barely alive at this point. Like, and I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, it's elder abuse. I think he's consenting to this, and he's a pretty evil man, based on his voting record, and just the kind of person he is. So I don't feel sympathy for him. But there's no way he could survive another term. And I think the Democrats are at least smart enough to know how much the public hates Kamala Harris and knows how useless she is, and that they can only play the race card so long. But I think Gavin Newsom I think he's kind of a sociopath, and he lies like it's breathing, and he would be the perfect dictator to put into office. But yeah, I agree. He's absolutely planning to run, if not this term, next term after. But I think that anyone who's considering voting for him should visit LA specifically, or San Francisco, Oakland, at least once before they cast their vote, so they can see what they're getting themselves into. I don't think anything's going to happen to Hunter Biden. I remember when the media and the left absolutely crucified Trump's sons for what they deemed was trophy hunting over in Africa, you know,
Yeah.
and if that's horrible, why is Hunter Biden's, you know, activity not horrible? It's so much worse.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I saw that Alex Jones. I don't know if you saw Alex Jones on Tucker Carlson yesterday. It's an incredible
I
interview.
didn't. I
It
saw pieces of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an incredible interview. But essentially Alex Jones kind of talks about this, where you have this situation where Gavin Newsom wants to run. And by the way, in my different life, when I was still a moderate Democrat, I worked on campaigns in the Democratic Party, and I would go to the state conventions in San Francisco and San Diego. We always alternate north and south. And I've met Gavin Newsom back when he was lieutenant governor several times. And the very first time that I met him, the stuff that he said that I heard when he asked if there was, he literally goes, is anyone here from the Sacramento Bee, from the Chronicle, from the Times? No? Okay. So because you have to announce yourself as a member of the
Mhm.
press if you're asked. The stuff he said after he found out there was no press in the room, I was like, this guy is a piece of crap. And I had nothing against him. I actually liked him, right? Because I didn't really know much about him. Like, this guy is conniving. This guy is a liar. He's a sociopath. And this was back in, like, I would say 2004. I want to say, when Obama was still you know fairly new
Mhm.
in the game. But when I saw that, I'm like, this is a bad dude. It might have been 2007 actually. My years get, well, whatever. But to see that he's not changed whatsoever, he's gotten worse and worse, and the way he
Yeah.
dodges questions, the way he won't answer stuff, and now his track record of having a $68 billion deficit in the state of California, like, who in the right mind would vote for a guy like that? The only thing that I can think about is people who are so indoctrinated in this socialist, Marxist, leftist politics that are going to vote for him just because he's who he is.
Yeah.
He is the poster child of the left. And if he's enacting socialist policies, that's all people care about because they think
Yeah.
it will work.
Yeah. And whatever's trending at the moment, we say, like, I can't imagine how anyone would vote for him. Look at what he's done already. But I know my generation, I'm 24, so I'm technically Gen Z. So Gen Z millennials, they actually really like him, which is scary. They defend him. They think he's really cool. And that is scary to think about because they're going to be the next big voting block as the older generations die off. So I don't know. We could see a Gavin Newsom presidency.
Yeah, I have seen some studies that say, or some polls, or whatever they are, that Gen Z is the most conservative, which is kind of weird to think.
Males,
The
Gen Z
males, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and then females are essentially females and black people are what keep the Democratic Party in power.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
that's a fact.
Yeah.
And Biden's losing the black vote.
Hmm.
I mean, I wouldn't say he's losing it, but well, he's not lost it, but he's losing it. He's in a
Yeah.
process of losing it because there's a great awakening, I believe, coming from, in the black community right now, the same
Yeah.
as everywhere else. So if they lose the black vote, they have to get it from somewhere. The
Hmm.
illegal immigrants, number one, and the people who are being indoctrinated by this stuff are number two. And I think
Yeah.
that's a new demographic voting block that they can rely on for at least the next 30 years.
Hmm.
But do we
Yeah.
even have that long with CBDCs and social credit scores and
No.
carbon credits and, like,
Yeah. No. You better start moving out to the country because we're not going to be able to shop in our grocery store soon.
yeah. Alex Jones actually talked about that yesterday. I keep bringing it up because it's fresh, but he mentioned the fact that they're trying to demonize white people who live in the countryside, in a suburb, essentially, because that's the last group of the population that they cannot control. They
Hmm.
can't control where you get your food from because you make
Yeah.
it yourself. They
Yeah.
can't control essentially everything about you.
Hmm.
And I mean, I tend to believe that his logical line of where he goes makes sense. Where eventually you won't be able. There will be some kind of law or something that says that you can't leave your house unless you have some kind of cell phone that can geolocate you where you're at.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's crazy is they keep pushing this narrative that it's like white people, white farmers, and white America. But white people are the minority in Texas now. White people are the minority in the city that I live in. We got a lot of Black and Hispanic farmers and ranchers. I mean, cowboy culture came from Mexico.
That's very true. That's very true. Something sad here happened a few days ago. I'm a huge fan of the PBR, the rodeos,
Yeah.
and this LA City Council 2 days ago they voted to ban it.
Yes. Yeah. They lost
And
though, right?
well, so what happened was a lot of Mexican people came out and they said this is part of our heritage. Like
Yeah.
you're ruining our heritage. So they went with that, which was smart.
Mm-hmm.
So the LA City Council, what they said is, okay, well, let's go back and write out the law more specifically to allow certain kinds of rodeos that where there's no bucking.
Oh,
So essentially, you can have cultural rodeos where it's just, I guess, I don't even know what those are, where you just kind of, I guess, ride the horse around, but you can't have a bull, you can't buck. There's no bucking. So PBR no longer it's going to be able to be in LA, which is horrible because I would always go watch them.
yeah. Yeah, that's sad. There is a huge equestrian culture out there for sure.
Yeah, no, there really is. There's a lot of space in California where people
Mhm.
ride horses, especially over here in Burbank. I mean, all over the place. But
Yeah,
I guess I'll have to go to Orange County to watch the PBR next year.
I guess so. I
Yeah,
don't think that's a bad thing though. I love OC.
yeah, yeah. Growing up, you definitely get a dose of the more normal culture,
Hmm.
you know. But I think when people have kids, it's really hard to. I don't know. I would think that it's hard to be so activist when you have kids because you're busy. You're busy raising a kid.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
Actually, have a life. Yeah.
you have a life. Have you heard of this dink? These dinks, what are they called? Dinks. There's a video on TikTok going around. Have
I've
you seen
seen it
it?
on my Twitter feed. Yeah.
Yeah. So it means if someone hasn't heard of it, it means double income, no kids. And these people they made of they're basically talking crap about people who have kids. They said, yeah, like we can play with the kid and give it back to the parents. We can go on vacations. We can do all the stuff. And at first glance, it's funny, right? Like, oh yeah, dinks, double income, no kids. But if you see what they're pushing, they're trying to position parenthood as being something that dumb people do. Like, why would you
Yeah.
even have kids? You can live your life for yourself.
Yeah.
And it follows this narrative. It's really a communistic social, more like a leftist socialist narrative where they want you to have less kids. Well, especially the people who are pushing for depopulation. So I think
Yeah.
it's subtly a very negative thing for society.
Yeah. I mean, with the current birth rate, we're going to face a civilization collapse. People need to start having kids, or I don't know what's going to happen, but it won't look good.
Yeah.
But what I think is interesting about like the dink community, because it is becoming more popular, is that not only do they look at people who choose a family or stay-at-home moms as like inferior, um, I just can't imagine that being a fulfilling life, being super selfish and doing all the things you want to do when you want to do them. After, I don't know, 10, 15 years of that, your conservative friends, your dumb friends are going to have generations around them. They're going to have children, and then their children are going to have children. And when they're on their deathbed, they're going to have all of these family members that they created, and you're going to have no one.
Yep. And that's a sad place to be when you're older and you're not cool anymore, and just lifting weights doesn't really work anymore. What are you gonna live in an old folks home? It's a bunch of old
Bitter. Yeah.
other lonely people, be it alcoholic,
Yeah.
which is crazy. An ex girlfriend of mine, she had one of her grandmother lived in a facility, not a facility. It was a neighborhood in Orange County, and I said, What's it like, living just in this kind of community?" She said, "You know what it's like, Fabian? It's like high school all over again. You have cliques of people. You have the not the cool kids, but the cool singers and the not cool singers. You have the guys that hook up with all the girls, and everyone's drunk all the time because there's nothing else to do. So it's like you live all your life, you make all this money just to go back to being in high school again at the end of your life." She goes, "It's so weird." I said, "Do you
That's
get drunk?" She
wild.
said, "Hell yeah, I get drunk."
At least she's honest.
Yeah, yeah. But it's interesting. I I looked up the figures, and senior citizens have one of the highest rates of like STDs.
Really?
Yep.
Never would have guessed that.
And they're massive
Wow.
alcoholics as well.
Well, I would have guessed that, but
Yeah. Yeah. My cousin, he's a CHP officer, which is California Highway Patrol,
Mhm,
and he talks about how they have silver alerts. So you'd have amber alerts for, like, missing people,
mhm.
but there's a thing called silver alerts when an elderly person who is on meds disappears and is like driving a car most of the time. So they have to put out these um these notices to go find this person because they can hit someone very easily. And he said one time he pulled over. Now, he didn't pull over, sorry, they were crashed. And it was this guy who was like 80 something years old. Out of it, you could tell he was either on, Alzheimer's or a bunch of pills. And he couldn't arrest him because his chief said, you know what? I don't want this on our. There's going to be too much media. There's going to be too much crap that we have to deal with. Just get him back to his home. So he's like,
Wow,
yeah, pretty crazy.
that's wild.
Yeah, yeah. So when you get old, you can do whatever you want unless it's Joe Biden.
I guess so. Yeah.
Huh? Yeah. But I would love to know what your thoughts about what's happening with culture. I mean, we know it's well. Let me just leave it at that. I would love to know what you think is happening right now and where you think we can kind of steer clear of it.
Part of me is a bit of a doomer, like, oh my gosh, we're in a mess. And then the other part of me has a lot of hope. And I think there's a huge difference between millennials and Gen Z that I've observed and that studies have shown. Millennials are very entitled. They are like the depression rates are high. There's a difference with Gen Z because Gen Z almost recognizes what went wrong and they've started to switch mostly with the men, the young men. Unfortunately, the women are not quite there yet, but we're seeing a shift even with feminism. More Gen Z individuals, females, are rejecting feminism and choosing more of a stay at home mom type lifestyle, which is really encouraging to see. Um, so part of me looks around at culture and feels really sad because there is so much narcissism, so much depression, so much loneliness, the fentanyl crisis. But then part of me looks at Gen Z and is filled with hope because there are a lot of good things coming. Like Gen Z is the most sober generation. Who would have thought the youngest, demographic would be the most responsible with alcohol? Usually we're sold this narrative that it's your time to party, high school, college, you get drunk and you hook up and you go crazy and all of that. And Gen Z seems to be starting to reject that, as well as rejecting the 9 to 5 cubicle lifestyle. And some of them do that in the form of embracing socialism, obviously, but then others do it in the form of embracing entrepreneurship and creating a lifestyle that's more conducive to wellness and community and doing the things that they're passionate about. So I'm very interested to see where it goes, but it's hard to say one way or another, um, whether it's 100% good or 100% bad. I think it's very split down the middle, and a lot of it does have to do with gender.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're spot on because there's a lot of good that's happening, and a lot of the stuff that's highlighted is all bad because just negative news sells and it gets clicks, and
Yeah.
people just, for some reason, you watch local news, it's all negative news. But there's also a lot of good. There's a lot of innovation. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people who are thinking about the future and saying, why are things the way they are? These people hundreds of years ago created the system that we live in today. Why not
Yeah.
make it better? And
Yeah.
that's very capitalistic. Um,
Yes.
then you have the other side of the equation, which is socialism, and which in the end is the goal is to be a communist country, and we have that fight that's reared its head now we
Mm-hmm.
have to fight all over again, like our ancestors fought it for the first
Mm-hmm.
time around. But this time, the tools that the communists have, especially in China, because they literally are communists. So I would say the communists and the socialists, the tools they have are so much more powerful than what they had back then. So we're having to contend with a world where technology can track every single thing you do every single day,
Mm-hmm.
um, and in the future, maybe even everything that you think. So
Yes.
I think we're headed towards a climax, and I think this next election is probably going to be. I mean, in my estimation, aside from Abraham Lincoln and what happened with him, I would say probably, in my opinion, the most important election that we're going to have. because another 4 years of what's happening now, and I don't know if we rebound from it, because we know the entire world follows the
Yeah.
U.S. And if we're the last bastion of freedom, and we're the last country that has a true First Amendment in our Constitution, and everyone else falls, and we're the last one standing, then what's going to happen to the world? I
Yeah.
don't know that
That's it.
humanity would ever be able to get out from under that because of the amount of technology that we have now around us.
Yeah. The only option will be to live outside the system and to learn how to process your own food and all of that. But I do wonder, are we even going to have an election in the traditional sense? I think the voter turnout would have to be so overwhelming that they cannot compensate with the ballot harvesting and all of their fraudulent activities. So we'll see.
Yeah, and Alex Jones he brings up a good point. So in the interview with Elon Musk, which I've referenced 100 times now, but it just happened, so it's fresh in my mind. But he was talking about how Klaus Schwab likes to telegraph his next move. I think
Mm-hmm.
Klaus Schwab is the head of the World Economic Forum for anyone
Yes.
listening, but he has this narcissism in him where he especially in the last 5 years, where he's saying things that you're like, dude, is he really saying that in public? He must feel so untouchable that he can
Mm-hmm.
say whatever he wants. Whereas before, you'd have to say things kind of with a double in double speak or with hidden meanings. He's just saying it outright.
Yeah.
So he's already saying that there's a possibility that we could have a massive cyber attack, which is what people have been saying for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Does that happen before the next election so we don't have an election? Does something happen to the candidates where we can't have an election? Like, what are they planning? I'm sure they've planned for option A, B, C, D, E, and F, where we're just thinking about A and B. These people who their only job is to try to conquer the world, which is pretty insane to think about.
Yeah.
Every single day you wake up, how can I conquer the world? That's a horrible way to live. So if that's all you do, and that's your job, you probably have 15 different options of what you can pull, like COVID.
Yeah. Back in the 1990s, a card game came out. It was the Illuminati card game. And the Illuminati card game accurately predicts a lot of world events, including what happened at the Pentagon on 9/11 and the Twin Towers. And then obviously, this was years before that happened. One of the things that it predicts is that there is a charismatic leader who looks strikingly like Donald Trump, who will come to power, and then an assassination. And I think that if Trump wins, I almost believe it's because they allow it. And it would not surprise me if there was an assassination.
Well, here's the idea to that I have. Since everyone is talking about it already, everyone knows it's a possibility, and everyone knows who's going to be culpable if something like that happens. Being that, let's say it is your plan to do that, right? Like, let's say you're the globalist organizations, whatever, and everyone's looking at you and everyone's calling you out. Do you do it? Do you take that chance?
I think I
Because
would.
and then you're going to activate. I mean, well, look, if your job is to cause a civil war in this country, cause
Mm-hmm.
chaos, cause a collapse of it, then yes, I guess it would make sense because it serves a purpose. And if you're 2 degrees of separation away from it, then yeah, they can point fingers and accuse. But if there's really no proof, there's no proof other than, speculation, I guess. So
Yeah.
it's
Like you were
interesting.
saying earlier, I think like the boldness, the brazenness that they have now, part of their weird satanic religion is that they believe in karmic retribution. So they believe they have to tell us what they're going to do um, before they do it in order to clear their karma. And so historically, they've always done that in very subtle ways, very small ways. So people say, oh, symbolism will be their downfall. And I don't think they're hiding behind symbolism anymore.
No, they literally have pedophile symbols on children's diapers.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anyone's seen this, but I posted on my story not too long ago. But they literally have the symbol for I think it's like boy lover, that
Mm-hmm.
triangle,
Yeah.
um, on kids' Pampers. Like if that's not obvious enough, and if you're looking for a bigger sign than that, like that's as obvious as it gets.
Yeah.
And this whole, I mean, I don't want to get into the whole Pizzagate stuff, but that whole thing is just these people are
Yeah.
so sadistic and weird. And
If you knew what they were doing, you wouldn't be able to sleep.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I think it's all coming out now. And I told Mike and Gentry this. I think the reason why They're pushing so hard for this maps minor attracted person. Love is love. It doesn't matter what age is because number one, they believe it. But second of all, I think there's a possibility. Well, I think they know that eventually the Epstein list will come out
Yep.
and they'll have to have a way to combat it. If you can
Hmm.
turn public opinion to be okay with whatever is going to come out, then it lessens the blow of that coming out. So you
Hmm.
try to diminish the impact that it'll have. That's why I think they're waiting as long as they can to until it gets out, because when it does, it's going to cause a firestorm. And if you
Hmm.
can indoctrinate enough people during that time to say, well, I mean, it's cool because a man could be a woman or whatever they want, and love is love. We're all one. Age is nothing.
Yeah,
So that's personally my opinion on why they're doing that.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, yeah. So we've been going on for about 45 minutes now. So before we get out of here, can you tell people how to find you and maybe your socials?
Yeah, absolutely. I am on TikTok and Instagram as Bryanna X Robinson, and I'm on Twitter as Bry Robinson. And then I will be starting YouTube soon, and that is all linked in the bios of all of my socials.
Well, I'm excited to see that. And yeah, if you don't follow Brianna, make sure you follow her because the videos are incredible. So thank you so much for being on. I really had a joy talking to you and kind of diving deep into some of these subjects. And can't wait to see more of your stuff come out.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me.
See you guys later. Thanks for tuning in, and make sure you follow both of us on that ticker symbol right down there. There's both of our Instagrams, so make sure you add us, and we will see you next time.